Well, we are in day 4 of our 21-day journey through the Gospel of John. Thank you all for joining once again with us. I'm excited that you guys are joining each day. Hopefully you're getting encouraged. Hopefully you're getting to spend a little more time in God's Word. And hopefully this encourages you and gives you the desire to go a little bit further. And you guys are doing that either in the YouVersion plan that we started yesterday or that you're doing in your own personal study time. Again, I say I can't cover everything in a chapter. So hopefully you guys are spending time learning and growing as you spend more time reading what else is going on in each story. But John chapter 4 is packed full with a lot of amazing stuff. Amazing encounters with Jesus. And there's actually 3 different encounters that we see here. The first being the encounter with the Samaritan woman. The second is his encounter with his own disciples. And then the third is an encounter with an official whose son is dying. And we're going to talk about all 3 of them. Hopefully we can get to all 3 in the time we have. But the first story is Jesus and the Samaritan woman. And it says Jesus left Judea, going to Galilee, where he's going to continue ministering, continue doing the work of God. And he comes to Samaria. Now, Jews and Samaritans did not have a good relationship. The Jews considered Samaritans to be half-breeds because years prior they had intermarried with the Assyrians, who were considered their pagan enemies. Even though they shared a common ancestry, a common heritage, they had now broken off from that heritage and intermingled with their enemy, and they've now established their own culture. They've established their own form of worship. They are basically a completely different people, and the Jews did not get along with them. And so typically what would happen, the quickest way from Judea to Galilee was to go through Samaria because of the terrain. But sometimes it says that Jews would intentionally go out of the way, extend their trip longer to get to where they were going. And, imagine I'm in Parkersburg right now. If I'm going to Williamstown, what's between me and Williamstown is Vienna. If I were to despise Vienna, which I don't, if I were to despise Vienna, I would go across the Belpre toll bridge, pay my 50 cents, travel up Route 7, come across through downtown, take across the bridge to Williamstown just to get to Williamstown. And that would be absolutely insane. I would never do that. The quickest way is clearly having to go through Vienna, and so I would do that. But Jews here would not want to go through Samaria, but Jesus breaks a cultural barrier, and what he's starting to show, he's starting to reveal his plan, he's starting to reveal his gospel and how it goes out to all people. And so he comes to Samaria, and he goes to the well, tired out from his journey, which just kind of showing the humanity of Jesus, that he gets tired, and he goes to the well. He sends his disciples ahead. They go out looking for food. They basically go out grocery shopping. And he sits down at this well, and it says it's about noon, and that's now the hottest part of the day. So the people who had been coming to the well for water had probably already come that morning, or they'd be coming that night when it's the coolest part of the day. Anybody who comes to the well now doesn't want to interact with people, doesn't want to be seen, doesn't want to be around people. But it says a woman shows up, and he immediately engages and interacts with that woman. And by doing so, he's breaking a couple cultural barriers. The first cultural barrier is he's talking to a Samaritan. And the second one, he's talking to a woman. One, it's uncommon for a Jew to associate with a Samaritan, but the second, it's also uncommon she refers to him as rabbi. It's uncommon for a rabbi to talk to a woman who's not with a man. So 2 cultural barriers that he breaks here, but he starts engaging in a conversation with her about this idea of living water. And he starts unraveling a wound in this woman's life. And what we end up finding out that she's had 5 husbands, and the man that she is now living with is not her husband. And what Jesus is trying to get to in this story and trying to get to in her interaction is that she is completely empty. She's looking for something to make her whole. She's looking for something to make her complete. She's longing to be satisfied. She's longing to be made whole. We don't know the story of why she's had 5 husbands, but you can start to figure out and put all the dots together, connect all the dots, that she is looking for satisfaction in men. And Jesus now begins to offer her this chance of living water, this water that will always satisfy. And what he's offering is himself. And she's a little bit confused by the story. And if you remember back to yesterday, Nicodemus was a little confused too in what Jesus was talking about. But he starts to unravel the story in front of her. And then what we see here is actually the first public declaration of who Jesus is. The first time in this gospel where Jesus says who he is. And he says to her, I'm the Messiah. She knew about the Messiah. She knew about the story of Jacob, their ancestors. They knew the story about where worship would come to take place. She knew about this Messiah who would come, and he says to her, that man you talk about, that Messiah you talk about, that's me. I am he. Jesus chose to reveal himself fully first to a woman, not just a woman, a Samaritan woman, showing that his gospel was not just for the Jews, it was for everyone. And the story goes on that the interaction with this woman, I encourage you to read it a little bit further and just see how the dialogue continues. But the story goes on that she is so changed by this interaction. She's so moved by this encounter. As Jesus presses into that wound and exposes the hurt, and exposes the pain, and then shows that void and reveals himself as the only way to fill that void, it says she leaves her water jar and runs back into town. She leaves the thing that she brought to the well every single day. She leaves the thing that identified herself with her sin, with her choices, with her emptiness. She leaves that there and runs back to the city. And in that story, we see what I've always said, she becomes the very first missionary in Scripture, because she runs back from the well into the city and tells everybody about her encounter with Jesus. She tells everybody about this man who had told her everything about herself. Could this guy be the Messiah? But meanwhile, the disciples come back, and this is where we're getting to the second interaction. They come back and they saw Jesus interacting with her, and they all wanted to say, why is he talking to her? But no one said it. But Jesus, being Jesus, knew what they wanted, knew what they were thinking. And he basically says to them, look, it's time to reap what others have sown. The harvest is right here for you. It's time to look at the harvest and get to work. And what he's starting to describe to them is that the gospel seed has been planted. He has been planting this all along. It is time to harvest and join in that effort and join the mission of God. And he says, look up your eyes, see that the harvest is right, is white, and is ready. And a lot of people believe what he's now saying. He's preparing these disciples for what's coming right now. And what is coming right now is a village full of Samaritans who have heard the testimony of this woman are now coming to hear the testimony themselves. It's now time to join in God's work. It's now time to join in the mission that Jesus was revealing to his disciples. And it says that the Samaritans came to Jesus, and many believed, not just because of the woman's testimony, but now because of what they encountered with Jesus too. Because when people encounter Jesus, their lives are changed. The third story is a story that goes on as he leaves Samaria. He continues on his way. As he continues on his way, he encounters a Roman official. It just says an official. Most scholars believe he's probably a Roman centurion who has a son who's on his deathbed. He's dying, and he comes to him and says, Jesus, I need you to heal my son. I need you to heal him. And Jesus responds to him, he's like, you will only believe if you see signs and wonders. It's a lot of people at that point were only believing because they saw signs and wonders. And signs and wonders aren't a bad thing, but they cannot be the basis of faith. Faith must be the basis of faith. He says to him, your son is alive. Believe in me, believe in the word that I have spoken. And the man believed, and he went back home, and as he's on his way home, some of his fellow officials met him on the road and says, your son is alive. He's doing well. He's recovering. And the guy asked, when did this happen? He says, about the 7th hour. And he remembered that the 7th hour is when Jesus spoke this into existence. He spoke and he healed this man's son. And the cool thing about this whole story, as I said, it's revealing all of God's plan and purpose. If you go into the next book, in the book of Acts, we see the church begin to explode. We see the church going out into the mission. But it starts in Acts 1:8. It says, Jesus says to them before his ascension, you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the outermost parts of the earth. And in John chapter 3, Jesus begins his ministry working in Jerusalem, revealing himself to a Jew, and Nicodemus, and to his disciples. And then he goes into chapter 4 into Samaria, revealing himself to the Samaritans. And then on the way out, he meets a Roman official, revealing himself to the outermost parts, the people who were outside the city, the people who were outside the people. And he starts showing how his gospel mission was for everyone. And it's time for his disciples to join in this framework, this mission that he feels as ready to be harvested. So as you go about the rest of your days, you spend more time reading in John chapter 4. I encourage you just to think about these different questions. First, do you desire to join Jesus in his mission? Do you have that same urgency because of your encounter with Jesus? Do you now desire to join him in that mission? Are you ready to go to the outermost parts of the earth, to Jerusalem, to Samaria? The second, who in your life needs an encounter with Jesus? Who would be encouraged by your encounter with Jesus that you should want to bring Jesus to, or bring them to Jesus? Who needs an encounter with Jesus? The third is whose life would be changed because of your testimony. You know, you were found at a well, just like this woman. You were found at a well, and Jesus encountered you, revealed an emptiness, and he filled it. But whose life will be changed because of your testimony? Think about that throughout your day today, and be encouraged and jump in to what God is doing